Hello everyone, welcome to this video. My name is Ryan. I have cerebral palsy and I've used a walker my entire life. Today we're going to talk about the word ableism. Now, ableism is a word that I see all over the internet. It's gotten pretty popular over the past several years. So I'm going to explain to you why I think it's a nonsense word and why in my entire life of having a disability, I have never once used the word. But first, let me get a sip of coffee. What is ableism? Ableism is a word that's used to describe normal people, places, and things to make them feel like they're the problem. It comes from this world of activism and academia, and it's used primarily as a pejorative. Let me explain to you what I mean. Let's talk about people first. When I was in second grade, I remember going on a field trip to a farm. There was this girl in class, she had a farm, a really nice farm in Ohio, and her parents had a bunch of horses. And I remember one of the activities that we got to do, we got to ride one of the horses. And so the way that it was set up was, all the kids got in line, all 30 something of us got in line. And there was one person that was walking the horse, and kids just hopped on one by one and got on the horse, and they just got to pretty much ride the horse for 10 feet, and then they hopped off, and that's how it went. Sort of like something you would see at a state fair or a farmer's market, something like that. Normally they would have just the person that was walking the horse in the front, but when I got on, they put like a bunch of people around me. There were like 4 people around me plus the person that was in front walking the horse, and they were all trying to protect me from falling off, which I understand, but the irony to that is that I grew up on a farm. And I had already had experience. My neighbor, Mrs. Clark, she had a pony, and I remember riding her pony numerous times myself. I mean, obviously it's not like I'm gonna be in the Kentucky Derby or anything, but I had some experience. I knew how to balance on a horse. But they didn't know that. And I remember feeling so angry and so frustrated that they would even do that to me. It was so embarrassing that they just put so many people around me to protect me from falling off when I had more experience than any of the other kids. Somebody could say, Ryan, that's ableist. That's ableist. That's not ableist. That's coddling, that's demeaning, that's disrespectful, that is patronizing, but it's not ableist. When you use a word like ableist, it's essentially this umbrella term that glosses over the nuance. So instead of saying how I actually felt, it's a lot easier to say, oh, that's ableist, than it is to figure out the actual descriptive words to describe that particular situation. Now let's talk about ableism in the context of places. Several years ago, I remember my friend, he and his wife, they bought a house here in LA and they had a housewarming party. And I remember at the housewarming party, they had everything set up in the backyard. The challenge was there were 3 or 4 really steep steps from the house down to the backyard, and there was no rail. He had to help me get down those stairs. And I remember as he was helping me down the stairs, he was like, sorry, man, I wasn't thinking about you when I bought this place. And I remember being like, how dare you? How dare you not think about me when you buy your $700,000 home? A few years back, I went to London and I went to the Tower of London. And I mean, this is a place that was built long before me. It's a super old place, and it wasn't accessible. I couldn't really go up the stairs. There weren't any rails. And so there was so much of the Tower of London that I didn't get to see because it simply wasn't accessible. If you look at things through the lens of ableism, you're like, why wasn't there any sort of accessibility available to me? Why aren't these buildings that were built hundreds of years ago, why hasn't somebody made them accessible? Look, I'm very grateful for elevators in buildings, for large bathroom stalls. I love my parking that I get because I have a disabled placard. Those are all things that I don't take for granted, and I really do appreciate those things. Do I think that accessibility is something that people need to consider with new buildings and moving forward? Of course. That's why there are laws in America for that. But it's extremely entitled to think that the world has to retroactively adjust itself to accommodate me. The next thing I want to talk about are things. Now, things can be a lot, it's kind of abstract. So for this example, we'll talk primarily about social structures. When I was in second grade as well, I'm digging into my second grade bag of stories. I remember coming out to California to visit my aunt in Oceanside for the summer. In San Diego, there was this really, there was some sort of summer camp for disabled kids. And my aunt signed me up. And I was like, okay, I'll go. And I remember they came and they picked me up in Oceanside. I'm not even joking you, it was the short bus. It was like something you'd see out of his South Park episode. And I get to this camp, and I'm thinking it's gonna be a camp with other kids that have cerebral palsy or some sort of physical disability. And all of the kids there had severe cognitive disabilities. And, as someone with a disability myself, I understand that people have different needs. There's a spectrum of severity, But the reality is this: me having cerebral palsy, using a walker, having spasticity in my hands, that is nothing like someone with a severe cognitive disability. It's just not the same thing. And when you look through the lens of ableism, what you do is you put everyone that has any sort of disability under the umbrella of disability. It sort of flattens everybody into the same category. What it really does is it strips the individual of their autonomy. The problem with that is that having a disability is a deeply individual thing. Everyone that has a disability has their own unique experience. There's no one size fits all. My disability doesn't even necessarily relate to somebody else who has cerebral palsy. I mean, somebody else that has cerebral palsy, it could affect them verbally. It could affect them in other ways. The most important form of independence isn't physical. It's being able to think for yourself. And even with a disability, you have much more power than you think.